Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello, everybody. My name is Minh, and I'm with Debbie, your two co-hosts, and we're from NDIS Property Australia, and you're on the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that explains, highlights, guides, and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. Debbie, today is the 5th of September, 2023, and we have in our possession a document which was written June 23, which is 3 months ago, but only published on the NDIS website 3 days ago.
Yeah.
What do we have here, Debbie?
The Specialist Disability Accommodation Pricing Review 2022 to 2023 Demand Projections. Wow.
So I picked this up on LinkedIn 3 nights ago when people were saying, oh my God, did anyone see this? It's the demand projections for participants for SDA. And it was circulating online, and we're all wondering, like, oh my God, really? This is only published 2 days ago? So the NDIS, in their wisdom, have hidden this document in their system for so long that they finally realised they had to press publish or send it out. And here we are, looking at the document. And we wish we had this a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. We have been desperate for this kind of information, the demand projections, as per what the NDIA believe the SDA numbers are going to be in the future. You know, this has all been guesswork up until now, based on the 6% that they stated back at the beginning or even before the inception of specialist disability accommodation, and in conversations we've been having around the country over the last couple of years. Everyone has said, yeah, 6% is still looking good.
Well, it's not 6% anymore, is it?
No. But we have a more realistic number, I guess, and this is good. So, yeah, we need to take a look at what is in this document. So, Minh.
But before we go there, the current numbers now is 3.8% of the NDIS population are actually SDA funded. So 3.8% is now the new number as of the last few months. But according to this document, 3.8% is still too high.
Yeah, well, we don't know what the total projection of NDIS funded participants is going to be 20 years from now.
But there's a forecast here.
There's a forecast for SDA funded participants. So what that percentage is, I guess, less relevant now. It's all about the actual projected numbers.
So just before we go dig deeper into this document, the 9 or 8 parts of this is really the methodology, the projected demand based on the disability, by the age group, by the design category, by the state or territory, by the SA4 region, and also the absolute growth of SDA demand in these regions, and then also the projected SDA demand by 2042. So they're the basic content of this document, which will have part of our description below in the podcast description, obviously. But Debbie, let's go right into this document, and see where we're going.
Yeah. Well, just to actually go into the methodology in detail as described in this document, the SDA demand projections in this document are underpinned by the scheme actuaries' projections that were used to inform the 2023-2024 budget. The relevant results from the projection are the likely participant numbers and profile at a national level from June 23 to June 24. So the overview of the SDA demand model methodology is project Australian population by SA4 using the ABS statistics, project the NDIS participants by SA4, allocating the national NDIS participant projection to each SA4 based on the age, gender mix, and the current distribution of participants. And the third step, project the SDA demand by design category and SA4. So calculate the SDA demand for each design category in each SA4 based on the long-term propensity for NDIS participants to be in a SDA design category, the projected disability and demographic profile of NDIS participants in the SA4 and the current distribution of SDA demand by SA4. So, I mean, that to me looks like a pretty good methodology to get this. And it's just giving us a lot more information than we ever had before in terms of the number of participants that already have SDA and what they're categorised as. And this is something we have never been able to get the information on, i.e. how many currently have improved livability funding, have FA funding, have robust funding, have HPS funding. We now know that. This is huge.
Well, the findings of the document, Debbie, really shows that it's going to grow from 22,900 in 2022 to 36,700 in June 2042.
So 20 years period.
Now, we thought that 6% of a million by 2032 would be 60,000 in SDA. But it looks like only 30,000, 29,000 by 2032 now. So, what we've been fearing is there's going to be a lot of pullback from the NDIS to not approve as much participants for SDA funding as they used to do for the last few years, and pull back the approvals because they're trying to keep it sustainable. Yeah, which is understandable, obviously. It's not a bottomless pit of money. It's a shame that we're not going to see more participants on the SDA scheme, but it is forecasting a 2.4% annual growth of the approvals numbers per year for the next 40 years. Yeah.
20 years.
20 years.
I guess it's really important to consider at this point that we currently have 23,000 people with SDA funding. Now, we always talk about the demand isn't there, they're already all living in SDA, but they're not. They're all living in legacy or existing, or a lot of them are. And when we look at all our projections, we take into account that those legacies are going to be defunded. We know that's going to happen. And those existing older style SDA properties, we don't know how many and the time frame of when they are going to be phased out. But we know that a lot of them will be because they're not currently fit for purpose. They don't allow choice and control for participants living in them. So, and we've had discussions actually quite recently with SDA providers that have got participants living in these properties and they are desperate to find new build SDA to move them into because they're just not suitable. So we know that a lot of these 23,000 participants will still need to move into a new build. So really when we're looking at this and the forward projections, okay, the numbers might not be as high as we were expecting, but we've still got to take into account the number of new build properties out there, and that number is still really low. I think we're still only looking at about 4,000. So anyway, with that in mind, let's dive deep into some of these figures, Min.
Yeah, the first thing I want to raise is on page 80, Debbie. The largest cohort of participants for SDA will be in the 45 to 64 age bracket. And the fastest is obviously the fastest bracket of participants in the age group is 25 to 44, which is understandable given that half the participants in the NDIS are under age 18 at the moment. Yeah, we'll definitely see a lot more of them coming through the system to be applying for SDA. But as we know, the NDIS in their means to control the costs soaring, they're going to really make it harder for participants to apply for and achieve SDA funding, obviously. Yeah. Or
it could just simply be that a lot of these participants already have a basic level of funding. They will need to increase their funding levels so that they can move into new build SDA. And we know that from the information we get when we look at the overall SDA supports being paid. And the average is something like, $15,000, $18,000 per participant, when we know that the current new build funding is probably now on average up around 60. So whether, we just overestimated the number of SDA participants we thought would get funding in the future, or whether the NDIA really did have better projections from the beginning, which I'm assuming they did. I don't know whether it's about them cutting back on approving funding for new participants. I think maybe a lot of these people already were in the system in some form, and it's just going to be a tweak, if you like, to their funding for when they can move into new builds. So yes, the overall numbers aren't anywhere near as high as we thought, but I don't know that it's so much about them trying to cut back on the SDA funding approvals.
I think so. How else are they going to rein in costs? But then again, you are, I don't know. Look, SDA is a very small part of the NDIA.
Exactly, yeah. I don't think it's a part that's going to be such of import in the overall NDIS budget.
I think there's a hidden hidden topic here, Debbie, which is someone raised it recently, which was, I think someone told me at a networking event, it's strange how sometimes participants get funding for SDA at 1-to-1, but their shared funding is 3-to-1.
Yeah.
And that's weird. So again, back to funding amounts, because again, I'll give you an example. I'm leading to Robust in a minute. When a person gets 1-to-1 funding for Robust, they're on, like, for SDA amounts only here, we're talking about 60 or 70 or 80 grand a year, whatever the number is, 70-ish grand a year. But their plan is 400, 500, 600 grand to $1 million a year. And if you've got 2-to-1, as in 2 carers and 1 participant, you're looking at 1.2, 1.3 million a year. So that's massive numbers here.
That's where the money is.
Now, this is where I'm going with this topic here. If you look at this chart here on page 11 of this document, the 2022 numbers for Robust in Australia is 1866. The forecast projected SDA demand by design category for Robust here by 2032, which is 10 years from now, is 2911. That's 1,050 more approved SDA participants for Robust funding. 1,000 over 10 years.
100 a year.
That's 100 a year. 100 per year across Australia. 100 per year is only going to be approved for SDA Robust category. 100 per year across Australia. That's a very small amount.
Very small.
Why? Why is the government?
I think
It's about money. It's about money.
Absolutely, for the Robust, yeah. And if we remember back some weeks ago, there was an announcement by the NDIA that they were looking to
State support.
move people with psychosocial disabilities more over to the states rather than approving them in the NDIS.
The ABC News said, the NDIS believe it's not their responsibility to look after everyone on the NDIS system. There should be some responsibility by the state governments to share the burden of Robust funding for people with psychosocial.
Well, they didn't mention Robust. They just talked about people with psychosocial.
Which is implying Robust category.
Yeah, I guess because of the high level of supports required.
Yep. So, look, reading between the lines here, I'm seeing that there may be more state government funding approvals in the future to cover such a low proportion of this cohort called the Robust category of participants. I mean, why else is there such a, when the price review came out a month and a half ago, Debbie, we're like, what's going on with Robust? What's going on? This looked very weird to us, and we didn't know why. And here we are, another document coming out from June saying, well, they're going to approve a very small number here. So let me read page 11 to page 10 for our listeners to hear. Over the projection period, the proportion of SDA demand for improved livability is projected to decline slowly over the projection period to 36% in 2042. However, the absolute demand for improved livability is projected to increase by 3,200 participants over the projection period, which means IL is 10,026 in 2022 and IL will become 13,256 in 20 years' time. The SDA demand for high physical support is projected to grow over the projection period by 4,800 participants, becoming 31% of total SDA demand in 2042. The SDA demand for fully accessible is projected to grow by 3,400 participants over the projection period, becoming 21% of total SDA demand in 2042.
Yeah, so can I just reiterate those percentages by 2042 that are forecast by the NDIA? Improved livability, 36%. Fully accessible, 21%. High physical support, 31%. And robust, 12%. Now, this is quite different to what we have been expecting the overall breakdown to be. We were thinking it was going to be more along the lines of 70% having IL funding and about 10-10-10 for the others.
But, I take responsibility for that. I looked at all the disabilities on the list of the charts of the SDA funding, and I firmly believe that the majority of participants with intellectual disabilities fell in the category of the IL, looking at all the disabilities. They were looking at 50 to 70%. And that's why I said to myself, and I told the office here, I'm expecting 70% of IL participants out there being in the NDIS for SDA. But now the forecast here is showing a 50% of the accessible being FA and HPS.
Yeah. So that is really interesting. And this is such incredibly valuable information for the industry. because we know that the majority of properties that have been built so far, up around 67%, if I have my number correct in my head, have been built to high physical support. And if 50% of the population are going to need an accessible property, then that's actually not so bad.
Now, in my defense, Debbie, I still think I'm right. And I'll tell you why I think that. Because as we all know, the LHA, Australian Design Standards around Australia, are moving towards a benchmark of almost IL. So in light of that, in light of those changes by the Australian Building Code, right, you're not going to require as many IL houses because every house moving forward is going to be almost IL standards anyway. So that was a contentious issue raised by one of our podcast episodes with Oz Homes with Josh. He said, yes, maybe it's almost IL, but not exactly. But we'll see in time how the designs come out at the end of 23, right? And only 2 of the states around Australia have not adopted that design methodology. But that is also, I believe, a standard in which we're going to see much more accessibility in the future of Australian building codes and designs. So therefore, we're not going to see the requirement of as much IL houses being approved, IL participants being funded for approval of IL because of these building codes there.
Because that's not needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point, Min.
Moving on, the demand by state. I wanna say I've been saying the word Melbourne for a long time, the last few months, 6 months, and the numbers here show us that Melbourne is the way to go for SDA exposure, for property exposure in the investment side of things for investors. Yeah,
there's actually up on page 18 the top 10 SA4 regions that have the largest absolute growth in SDA demand from 2022 to 2042.
And the top 3 are Victoria, Melbourne. So number 1 is Melbourne West at 883 participants from 2022 to 2024 with a growth in demand of 152%. Ranked number 2 is Melbourne Southeast, 641 participants, an 87% increase. Number 3 is Melbourne Inner, 518 and 167. And Debbie, we've been talking about Melbourne Inner City for a long time, the last 8 months.
Absolutely.
Go back to all our podcasts. We've been saying inner. And that's why we're doing a lot of rollout of SDA apartments over the next 3 years in Melbourne, because we're doing our own homework and we know that's where the market's going to be. But surprisingly, number 4, oh my God, surprise, Gold Coast.
And what was I talking about a couple of months ago on my SDA Unlocked?
So
absolutely.
432, 127%. And number 5, Woot Woot.
What else have I been talking about?
Perth Northwest. Here we go, number 5. So you know what? Go back to all our podcasts, everyone. It's written in the Ethernet, called the internet, right? All these predictions we've been making are all coming out as per the NDIA forecast as correct. So number 5 is Perth Northwest, which, as you said the other day, Debbie, there's hardly any supply coming out in Northwest, is there?
No.
Everyone's going Southeast.
I believe the main problem is that it's very hard to get land that is affordable and the right kind of land in the right sort of locations. But the demand is by far the highest in Perth.
I keep on saying this, do not follow the herd. Whatever you see out there from other agencies and other marketers and other providers, don't follow them, because you don't want to fall in the trap of doing what everyone else is doing. Study the research, study the data, make up your own mind, get some second opinions. And our own business here of NDIA Property Australia, we have been doing so much research in the background, and every once in a while we mention what those findings are, and it's coming to fruition here with all this data. That's number 5. Number 6, Southwest Sydney. Oh my God, we have a ton of stock in Southwest coming out of Sydney.
Yep.
And we're primed for that as well. And surprisingly,
number 7,
Melbourne Northeast, another Melbourne one.
Yep, again another area we've been talking about.
Yes, Northeast as well. ACT, whoa. Kind
of forgotten about a lot in SDA in Australia. There's been such little development in the ACT.
Now, if you go to page 12, Debbie, ACT only has 349 participants. That's it in SDA.
Yeah.
It's not much.
But they're going to almost double.
Yeah.
By 2042, 97% increase in SDA participants.
One of our clients called JJ, he's looking at building 3 for himself. He's a builder himself in Canberra. He's looking to retain them himself. Yeah, so he'll be in a good place.
Yeah, I just actually did a report for him that was quite interesting. It's the first time we've really looked into the ACT data. And yeah, definitely a good demand down there. Very little supply.
And number 9 is Melbourne Northwest. Very good. That's 336 increase from next 20 years at 124%. And lucky last is New South Wales and Sydney at Parramatta at 72% increase in the next 20 years.
Again, another location that we've been doing a lot of work in or have got a lot of stuff coming in.
So I want to tell our listeners out there, of the top 10 lists, we've been active in all 9 of them, 8 of them. But barring Gold Coast, 8 of those 10, we've been really active in all those areas. Okay, so, we have been very transparent with our knowledge and our experience, our research. We say it on the podcast. We reveal our stock that we have access to on our website. It's always there. You give us a call. We're happy to give you our entire stock list in the background as well. So we have nothing to hide. We want to show show the community, the NDS community who are interested in stock supply pipeline, SDA data, that this is where the market is going to grow. You follow the basics of property fundamentals and population growth, but also a bit of common sense in terms of amenities and research to hospitals and growth areas as well. So that's obviously important. But it's good to see that we're on the right track ourselves to be in this absolute growth in SDA demand in the next 20 years. Yeah.
Now, there's some more figures that I just wanted to go over, Min, when we're going back to page 12 here and the projected SDA demand by state territory over the next 20 years. And I've actually put these into a percentage increase. Okay, the 2 highest states in terms of participant numbers are New South Wales and Victoria. They are both slated to increase by 56% in New South Wales and 55% in Victoria. So that doesn't sound a whole lot, but we're still talking about an extra, 4,000 odd participants in each state added on there. What's interesting is the next 2 states, Queensland and Western Australia, where the numbers slated to increase by 87% over current SDA funded numbers at the moment. What that actually means in Queensland, we're going from 3,400 to 6,400, so another 3,000 participants. In Western Australia, we're looking at an increase from 1,800 to 3,400, so another 1,600 participants. South Australia is an interesting one. We're not seeing a huge increase there. 27% from 2,400 to 3,000, only another 600 participants. Tasmania, 52% increase, so sort of on par with the Victorian numbers. Of course, the numbers themselves are much lower. We're looking at currently about 600 participants and a projection of around 900 in 2042. We just talked about the ACT and the last one being the Northern Territory, that they're looking at a 63% increase from 268 to 438.
I want to talk about the Northern Territory for a second here. We were at the SA conference in Brisbane about 2 months ago, and I met a gentleman by the name, I forgot his name, but he represented a lender. I won't mention the name. And he said, we're pretty busy in the ACT, in the Northern Territory in Darwin. I said, really? So do you do your research and ensure that you're not going to overexpose yourself as a lender in the area? He goes, yeah. So I said to him, so how many deals are you doing at the moment? We're doing 60 deals right now in Darwin. Okay. So in my mind, 60 deals times 2.
120 to 180 places.
180 places. There are only 260 right there right now. So in my view, in my opinion, saturation is coming in Northern Territory very soon, within a few months, within a year.
Yeah.
The numbers are too small. 268 in all of Northern Territory. In all of Northern Territory, Debbie. Not Darwin. All the Northern Territory is 268.
Okay, probably the majority are in Darwin.
Yeah. But 268 versus 7,000 in New South Wales, like if you go into the small markets, don't be careful there.
Definitely, yeah.
You may be the first one in there, but you won't be the last one. There'll be another 200 houses behind you, and they'll be better than yours.
And this is why it's so important to talk to different people and find out what's actually happening. And this is where we're lucky to be in the position we are. We're talking to these people who say, we've got this many projects happening. We got this happening there, this happening there.
So I don't mean to beat our own drum here, but only because we were at the conference did I happen to talk to the lender for a brief 10 minutes. Did he tell me he's doing those numbers in that area? So that gives us a gauge as what to avoid as well ourselves. I mean, Northern Territory, ACT, Tasmania, they're very small markets. I would call them micro markets. And if you're going to go into those markets, be ready for oversupply, be ready for turnover of participants, and be ready for, the unknowns. And The only way to be safe is being in a market, a major market, a metro market on the East Coast, where the population's there, the participants are there, and I think you'll be safer there in that category.
Or Western Australia, where there's that 87% increase, and it's still a very new market.
Yeah. So, Debbie, what else is in this document that stands out that should be mentioned to you as well?
Look, I think that kind of summarises the crux of it. There's a bunch of pages that go into the projected SDA demand by SA4 region. So that's just going through each of the 107, whatever there are, SA4 areas, and the projected numbers 2022, 2027, 2032, 2037, 2042. And again, for those 107 SA4 regions, the breakdown at 2042 for each of the 4 design categories: improved livability, fully accessible, robust, and high physical support. So it's if you are interested in a particular area, that's really good information to pull out. For example, let's talk about Gold Coast, where we know that there is a big demand, and it's the top 5? So we know that we've got 772 funded participants by 2042, the breakdown being 257 will be expected to have IL funding, 275 HPS funding, 160 FA funding, and only 80 robust funding by 2042. So that's all well and good, but that is 20 years away from now. We kind of really need to know what's needed now and in 5 years' time to make these projections useful. So that's probably less important now. I think looking at those 5-year periods and the 10-year periods in terms of numbers is better, and of course taking those category projections that they also have listed back on page 11. I've still got to really look at this data in terms of our future data expectations that we've been working on, and I think it definitely will change things. But yeah, it's a bit of clarity for the industry on really what is needed and where.
For the last 3 years, I've always said to our staff and also our investors, whatever you think you're going to get, just halve it, right? I've always said those words. So looking at these SDA numbers now.
They're halved.
Yeah, where we thought it was 6%, but now they're really 3.8% currently, but they're only going to be 3% eventually. Well, half of 6 is what? 3. So it's halved, right?
Yep.
Halve your expectations.
Yeah.
Halve it. So I wish we'd taken our own advice. But right now the numbers are half what we all thought was 6%. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, look, I think that's basically what this report is telling us. If you're interested in reading this for yourself and getting a bit more insight, then, yeah, we'll have the link.
Yeah. But more importantly, everyone, to our listeners, we are still going to dig deep in the data. Our data, the Housing Hub data, Summer Foundation data, just the quality report. It still reinforces everything. We do encourage our listeners to engage our office at NDIA Australia to do a report on any particular area that they think they are keen on looking into. We get a couple of weird inquiries all the time, as in Canberra or Mackay or certain parts of Perth. Like, it's okay. Like, we don't judge.
Rural Victoria.
Yeah. Just it's $200 for the report. Give us a call. Put the request in, and we'll give you our opinion based on government data and our other data to show you as an investor, before we spend $900,000 to $1 million, spend $200 on a bit of report.
Yeah. And look, this information is just going to give us another level.
Yeah. It's not the accurate total truth. It's just a forecast only, Debbie. But doesn't change is the grassroots information on the ground at all these different locations, by providers and participants telling us their numbers, and also the lenders who are doing those loans in certain areas. They tell us. We can ring them up right now and ask the question, and they'll give it to us. But to the consumer out there, they can't find this information out. You can't get that data. Who's building what, who's lending what money, who's asking what kind of participants and houses in certain areas. We get this data from cold calls and coffee conversations with people. That's how we get this information, right? So, I keep on dragging to my staff here and saying, look, the best way to get information out of anyone is give them a free meal at lunch and a free drink, and they'll give you whatever information you want, right? And that's the best way to even work with lawyers. They go to a lawyer's office, take a lawyer after lunch, yeah? You give them a free meal, and he'll give you free information, yeah? Anyway, so if you want information from us, take me out for lunch. Debbie, any final words of advice for anyone listening to the episode at the moment right now?
Look, yeah, I just want to reiterate that This is the demand projections, and it's only half the story. And it's a great additional piece of information we've just been given by the NDIA. Thank you. But the supply is also as important. What's actually on the ground, what's constructed, what's existing and legacy properties, what's in the pipeline.
So this is only half the information.
That's right.
The forecast demand.
Mm-hmm.
We need to know the forecast supply next.
Yes, the pipeline data. Like this is only broken down into the SA4, which is just really too broad for it to be of great value, but it's better than nothing. But we're really hoping that we're going to get more clarity on more detailed pipeline information in the future to help us with our projections, to match the demand projections.
Cool. Well, over and out. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.